Reading is a skill that people use daily. It's necessary to be successful in life. So let's discuss several characteristics of how the brain learns to read and the programs that are used at Grove City Christian School to produce successful readers. Reading is one of the most difficult tasks that we are going to ask the brain to accomplish. There is not a specialized area in the brain that is responsible for reading. It's a relatively new phenomenon in humans. There are three neural systems in reading. You have the visual processing, and this sends visual signals to the visual cortex. You have the angular gyrus, which decodes these into basic sounds. And then finally, you have the left brain language areas, which processes auditory sounds and phonemes in their head. There are several skills that a person needs to be able to read. The first one is phonemic awareness. This basically means that the person understands that the oral language that they speak and hear can be divided into small components, and that these can also be rearranged into new words. There's the alphabetic principle, where these small components can be represented then as letters. You also need vocabulary, that mental picture that relates to the text. And then there's fluency, where you read a text orally with speed and accuracy and proper expression. Then there's the text comprehension. This means that the word has meaning in its context and that it can make sense to the person who's reading. There are several phases that a person goes through as they're learning to read. You have the pictorial stage. This is where they have photographs in their mind of words and they recognize the shapes of letters. Then you have the phonological stage. This means that the letters correspond to sounds. And finally, you have the orthographic stage, which is where you can recognize words. These form specialized area in the left brain. At Grove City Christian School, they use two different reading programs. The first one is Foundations, which is part of the Wilson Language Training. This program was established in the 1980s for students that had dyslexia. And then in 2002, it was expanded to the general classroom. There is several components to Foundations, and they are phonemic awareness, phonics or word studies, high-frequency word studies, reading fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension strategies, as well as handwriting and spelling. The second part of their reading program is called the Daily 5, which was created in 2006, and it has 5 steps that you go through daily. First one is read to self. Second, work on writing. Third, read to someone. 4, listen to reading. And the 5th and final stage is word work. I'm not really familiar with either of these programs. I happen to teach in the high school in the world language, though I do see the results of these programs because if a student is struggling with reading in their native language, they are going to have a harder time learning to read and make those connections as they're learning a second language. Some of the findings and insights I had was I was very frustrated, I guess is a good word, as I was looking at the websites and doing some studies on both of these programs. And I really did not see a lot of information based on neuroscience and how this corresponds to how we learn a language. Each program, I think, has has some very, very good points. With the Foundations program, there are several things like phonemic awareness, the reading fluency, vocabulary, and the comprehension strategies. Those all directly relate to the skills that I talked about earlier that a person needs to read. And one of the best ways to learn reading is to practice, which they definitely get from the Daily 5. One of the things that I did notice that was missing in Seuss's book, it talked a lot about that talking and that discussion, and I didn't really see a place too much in either of these programs where that is.